Hi guys, and welcome to Church Online. My name is Ashley and I am the communications apprentice here at South Hills, and we are so excited that you are here watching with us. If you are brand new, we would love to invite you to fill out a Connect card. The easiest way to do that is to text the word Connect to 951-476-2554. You can also find the link for that down in the description below. The Connect card is the easiest way to get connected here at South Hills. It gives us a chance to find out a little bit about who you are, and you can also ask questions about getting involved here, whether that's joining a serving team, a growth group, taking a next step, getting baptized, or just letting us know how we can be praying for you. We've got a couple of exciting things coming up, and I wanted to let you know about them. Coming up on October 24th at 10 a.m. is our next family experience. If you missed any of the family experiences we put on this summer, then you definitely want to make it out for this one. It's a great day that's good for the whole family to come out, worship together, learn, play some games, and just have some really great family fun time. It's coming up on October 24th at 10 a.m., and you can register on the Church Center app. Another thing that we wanted to let you guys know about is a serving opportunity with Leaps and Bounds. It's coming up also on October 24th from 1 to 6 p.m. Now, there is an age limit on this, and you can find out more information about that in the Church Center app, but we would love to invite you guys to sign up to go help out at Leaps and Bounds for their horsemanship camps. These are a super fun event that they put on for all the kids and the siblings of those kids who go to the Leaps and Bounds therapy, and we would love to invite you guys to come on out, serve these kids, and have a really fun time. We'll be making crafts, playing games, hanging out with a ton of awesome kids, and we would love to see you guys out for this. Thank you guys so much for watching. Enjoy the service.
Your love never fails and never gives up. It never runs out on me. Your love. And on it goes as it overwhelms and satisfies my soul. Never runs out on me. Your love never fails and never gives up. Never runs out on me. Your love never fails and never gives up. Never runs out on me. Your love. And in death, in life, I'm confident, covered by the power of your great love. For dead is paid. There's nothing that can separate my heart from your great love. 'Cause your love never fails and never gives up, never runs out on me. Your love never fails and never gives up, never runs out on me. Your love never fails and never gives up, never runs out on me. Your love, the perfect love. Your love never fails and never gives up, never runs out on me. Your love never fails and never gives up, never runs out on me. Your love never fails and never
Well, I just want to thank you once again for tuning in today for Church Online. My name's Adam, and I'm the campus pastor here at South Hills Corona. And we are in the middle of something called Family Month. It is something that's been a tradition in our church for about 20 years, where we just take a season each year and talk about how to have great relationships at the core of our lives. And I want to encourage you to take some notes, write down some things that jump out at you. The title of my message today is Tabloid Tantrums. Tabloid Tantrums, which is just super fun to say 5 times real fast. Go for it. Give it a chance. Give it a try. A while back, I was with a couple of my kids, and we were getting some groceries. And as we're sort of standing in the checkout line, which, of course, as you guys know, is all socially distanced out right now. And so they're taking in all this information that normally they wouldn't pay attention to. And part of that is the magazines that are always lining the checkout, right? And it's usually like a bunch of random tabloid magazines. And I don't really know that I've ever noticed any of my kids ever paying attention to any of these before. But for whatever reason on this day, they were. And my kids were just kind of like examining the magazines and like looking at the different pictures. And one of my kids was like, whoa, is that true? Like pointing out some headline of some celebrity who had been accused of doing something heinous. And I was just kind of like, well, probably not. Okay. But we don't know. And one of my other kids was like, but that's wrong. Like they can't do that. And my youngest piped up and was just like, but it doesn't really matter when you're famous. I mean, as long as you got one good skill, you can pretty much do whatever you want. Then he kind of like paused thoughtfully for a moment. And he was like, I'm probably going to try and get famous. I mean, I would play video games all day and never do chores. Now, like kids have kind of always thought this way. Like when you were a kid, you didn't want to eat vegetables or do dishes either. But in the age of social media celebrities, what feels different now to me is that kind of life almost feels like a real option for kids growing up. I read this article a little while back that was saying, 20 plus years or so ago, when grade school kids were asked what they wanted to be when they grew up, the most common replies that they would give were policeman, firefighter, astronaut, lifeguard. And today, the most common answer when grade school kids are asked, what do you want to be when you grow up? They say, rich and famous. What's weird to me is that the aim, it's like it's somehow shifted from wanting to be heroic and helpful to just wanting to be celebrated and catered to. But this isn't really just a kid thing, right? Like this is a cultural thing. Like this way of seeing the world sort of slowly seeps in and swallows us whole. Some things that we tend to think in our culture is that, like if you're smart and savvy and strategic, you don't need to be sensitive to other people. We think things like, if you're stylish, witty, and pretty, people will put up with your immaturity. Like once you reach a level of popularity, you don't need to worry about integrity. Like people will totally ignore your character deficits as long as you continue to deliver the results they're after. Because I'm naturally good at this, I shouldn't have to deal with that. Like that's average people stuff. But I'm special. And why would any of us be tempted to believe any of this stuff? Because we've seen it work, right? Like we've seen it in the lives of other people. Maybe even people we know, definitely people who grace the covers of magazines. And for these people, it kind of works, at least for a little while. But some of you have lived enough life and maybe seen enough Netflix crime docuseries to realize that the facade always eventually gives way to reveal the foundation. Like people whose lives are propped up by performance and popularity but lack integrity, eventually their lives involve some kind of reckoning. And the bigger the facade they've built, the more devastating it is when the reality leaks through. But this sort of thing is really common in a culture that elevates confidence, competence, and charisma over character. The kind of culture that when you're sitting inside of it leads you to believe like, you know what? It is wrong, but it doesn't really matter if you're rich and famous, because as long as you have one really good skill, you can do whatever you want. And I guess maybe you can, but only for a while, because there's always eventually a reckoning. And nobody wants to see this happen, right? Like, none of us want to see our kids crash and burn because they lack character. Like, we don't want to wake up one day and realize, like, our innocent, adorable babies, like, that they have somehow evolved into shallow, hollow, self-centered people willing to do anything for likes, applause, cheers, or votes. And, I'll admit it, okay? I'm a little bit neurotic. So that is exactly what I was thinking. Standing in this grocery store checkout line, listening to what my son just said, staring at the magazine covers, like studying the smirk on his face, wanting to believe that he's in on the joke, a little nervous that maybe he's not, thinking like, I don't want this to be their bullseye. Like, I don't want their goals in life to just be rich and famous by any means necessary, because they believe if you build a big enough facade, the foundation underneath doesn't really matter. And I just began to think, like, how do we not end up here? Like, how do we, you and I, help our kids prioritize character over confidence, competence, and charisma? Because so much that surrounds them is saying the opposite of that. And I have no idea. Let's close in prayer. Just kidding. Maybe instead we'll look at this Old Testament story about somebody who royally screwed up his kids, and not on purpose. It was an accident. Like, he wasn't trying to, like most parents. It just sort of happened. And I want us to unpack this story, or part of this story, together, because I think we can learn from his mistakes. And hopefully, if we do, we don't have to make the same mistakes he did with his kids with our kids. This story is found in the book of 2 Samuel. We're going to start in chapter 14. Verse 25 says this: Now Absalom was praised as the most handsome man in all of Israel. He was flawless from head to foot. Sounds like somebody else I know. Not me. I don't want you guys to think I was talking about me. The guy was good looking, right? He was gifted. He was popular. Like, all the things that our society values on the surface, there's valued too. He was someone that, like, people were drawn to. He was magnetic. He was charismatic. Like, there was just something about him that you couldn't even always put your finger on. I brought a picture. I mean, weirdly, it looks like Ben Affleck. I don't know if that's good or bad, or this is just the picture that came up in Google, and we know that Google never lies. It goes on to say this, 2 Samuel chapter 15, verse 1, Absalom bought a chariot and horses, and he hired 50 bodyguards to run ahead of him. He got up early every morning and he went out to the gate of the city. Culturally, these are things that really only the king would have. And they were given to the king by his people to symbolize or signal that he was their king. Absalom, who's buying these things, he's not the king, his dad is, but he goes out and he buys this stuff himself for himself with his dad's money because he believes that he deserves them, even though he hasn't done anything to earn them. And David's advisors, like the people who are around him, kind of making sure that the kingdom stays put together, are like, hey, this is a problem. But David kind of just looks the other way. And there's a lot of reasons for this, but I think one big rationalization that he partially buys into is that Absalom is just a kid being a kid. It's just a stage. It'll pass. It's not that big a deal. But here is what we discover to be true in life. Selfishness that's tolerable in small doses is tragic in larger ones. Like, we latch onto these patterns as children that sort of chase us into adulthood. And that is definitely what happens here. The story goes on here. It says, when people brought a case to the king for judgment, Absalom would ask where in Israel they were from, and they would tell him their tribe. Then Absalom would say, you have really got a strong case here. It's too bad the king doesn't have anyone to hear it. I mean, I wish I were the judge. Then everyone could bring their cases to me for judgment, and I would give them justice. When the people tried to bow before him, Absalom wouldn't let them. Instead, he took them by the hand and he kissed them. Absalom did this with everyone who came to the king for judgment. And so he stole the hearts of all the people of Israel. Like on the surface, it kind of looks like maybe he's doing something noble and helpful, but maybe you're starting to realize like his motives are malicious. He's like, sounds like you're really in a tough spot. Man, I wish there was something I could do about it. I wish there was a way I could help, but alas, I'm not in charge. And the king, I mean, he doesn't really seem to care about you. I'm so sorry. It's all manipulation. This culture, in a lot of ways, the kingly culture that's been created in Absalom's house isn't all that different from our own. So Absalom is confident, right? In fact, he's flat out arrogant. He's charismatic. He's a schmoozer. He knows how to play politics and win the right people over. And he's competent. Like he's actually settling disputes between people. He's got this gift, like this way to connect, and he's really good at it. And he's helpful. But what he lacks is character. Like the way he goes about getting what he wants in life is shady. His attitude and his underhanded motives are poison. And as you begin to lift up the facade and look under to the foundation, you realize that he is extremely emotionally unstable, that he's completely erratic, that he is untrustworthy. And the people close to David are starting to see it, but David still doesn't really want to address it. What you learn as you dig into the life of David is that he really did genuinely care for his kids, just like we do for our kids. He really didn't know how to discipline them. And in his defense, like, he really wasn't that close with his father. There's this, legendary moment when this prophet comes to anoint David as king. They would pour this oil over a kid's head to symbolize, like, this is the next king of Israel. And when it happened in front of his whole family, his dad was the most surprised because he just didn't think his son was good enough. I mean, his dad was really hard on him. And when David becomes a parent, probably in an effort to not repeat his past inside of his own parenting, he swings the pendulum so far in the other direction that he hardly ever confronted his kids on their behavior. And so their bad behavior grows and mutates and picks up momentum. And I wonder if some of us have done the same sort of thing that David did. Like we genuinely love our kids, we care for them, but we don't want our kids to get what we got from our parents. And so we swung the pendulum so far the other way. And we're so good at connecting that we hardly ever correct them. In his book, Artificial Maturity, this author, Tim Elmore, writes about sitting down with all these parents who have come to him because he's like a mentoring specialist. They've come to him admitting that they have trouble disciplining their kids. And he sits down with this group of parents and he just asks them point blank, okay, if you know that there are certain things about your parenting that really just aren't working, like, why do you keep doing them? Like, what prevents you from addressing the issues that you're aware of in your parenting style and that you see in your kids' lives? And this is what they said. These are the reasons that they gave for not stepping in and properly parenting their kids. We want to be liked. Like, we want our kids to want to spend time with us. And, if you get onto them, if you discipline them, if you have a hard conversation with them, like if you enforce a consequence that they definitely don't want, like they're going to get mad and frustrated. And I don't know if that's something that, I can handle. And so because of it, we often don't have the backbone to make hard calls, to say no, to enforce boundaries, because we want to be liked. The second thing they said was, we want to keep them close so that we can keep them safe. We have seen so many episodes of CSI We've seen so many murder dramas on Netflix. We're afraid something's going to happen to these kids, okay? And if we're always there, then we can keep tabs on them. We can protect them. And we can be there personally to make sure that everything in their entire life is safe. And of course, the downside of this is that they never really get a chance to discover who they are, what they're made of without you. And so by the time they are old enough to actually need to make that transition, they don't have the tools to do so. Another thing that the parents said was, we feel cultural pressure to stay young. We're constantly being, marketed to about, thinking and acting and dressing young. I don't know if you've noticed this about our culture. Everything from TV to movies to ads, youth is our culture's god. Stay young, pretty, and thin. Keep up with the references. Make sure that you know everything that's going on. In other cultures, the elderly are revered and respected, but not in ours. And so parents feel like we need our kids around to keep us feeling young so that we can keep up, so that we can fit in. Another thing that the parents said was, we're just too tired to fight. We know what our kids should and shouldn't do, but holding the line is exhausting. Fighting your kids on certain fronts day in and day out wears you out. And after a while, you just give in because you're so worn out and you're too tired to keep pushing the issue and holding the boundary and enforcing all the consequences. And so you eventually just back off and you just kind of let them do whatever they're going to do. And the last thing they said was, we need them to need us to fill our own emotional tank. We don't really know who we are without our kids around. Our kids have become our life. They're where we get our affirmation and our attention. And so, what would we do without them? And because we're aware of this, we kind of subconsciously sometimes keep them from growing so that we can keep getting what we need from them, even if it stifles them. Now, obviously, none of us have ever thought, felt, or done these things, except all of them. But at their base, they're not all bad. But the thing of it is, when these things become patterns, we've got a problem. Because dysfunction evolves when we elevate our emotional wants over our kids' developmental needs. And it's really tough to admit to ourselves that that's what we've been doing. And it's even tougher to do the hard work of trying to move ourselves in a different direction. But it's worth it. And in fact, it's necessary. In order for your kids to grow up, you're going to have to grow up enough to stop leveraging these excuses. Here's the way one New Testament writer says it in the book of Hebrews, chapter 12. He says, no discipline is enjoyable while it's happening. It's painful. Could there be anything that is more obviously true, right? That is so true on every side of the equation. Think about it from a parenting perspective. It's not enjoyable for the kid who's being disciplined, and it's not enjoyable for the parent who's doing the disciplining. And it can feel like this is uncomfortable. This is painful. We all hate what's going on right now. So then why would we do it? The rest of the verse says this, but afterward, there'll be a peaceful harvest of right living for those who are trained in this way. He's saying if we stay the course, if we address the things that we need to, if we coach our kids well, if we do what is good, even when it doesn't feel good, the reward will be worth it on the other side. And if we don't, the consequences can be destructive and devastating. 2 Samuel chapter 14, verse 30 says this, Absalom said to his servants, go and set fire to Joab's barley field. And so they set his field on fire. And when Joab came to Absalom at his house and demanded, why did your servants set my field on fire? Absalom replied, because I wanted you to ask the king why he brought me back from this biblical named place if he didn't intend to see me. Literally, this kid whose behavior is really going unaddressed and unchecked by his father escalates from making little snide remarks and being immature and throwing kind of fits in public or manipulating people to, how can I get your attention? I'll set your entire field on fire and burn your house down. It's getting a little crazy. 2 Samuel chapter 15, verse 10 says this: he sent secret messengers to all the tribes of Israel to stir up a rebellion against the king. And soon, many others also joined Absalom, and the conspiracy gained momentum. A messenger soon arrived in Jerusalem to tell David, all Israel has joined Absalom in a conspiracy against you. Now he's actually trying to pull everyone on his side so that they can overthrow his father, the king. Then, of course, he pulls some advisors together, and this is the advice that one of these people gives him. 2 Samuel chapter 16, verse 21. Go and sleep with your father's concubines, for he's left them here to look after the palace. Then all Israel will know that you've insulted your father beyond hope of reconciliation. So he did it. Wow. It just keeps going. And you just think like David is definitely going to address it. He's going to step in. He's going to say something. It says this in 2 Samuel chapter 18, verse 9. During the battle, Absalom happened to come upon some of David's men, and he tried to escape on his mule, but as he rode beneath the thick branches of a great tree, his hair got caught in the tree, but his mule kept going and left him dangling in the air. And one of David's men saw what had happened and told Joab. This is Joab's response. What? You saw him there and didn't kill him? Enough of this nonsense. And then he took 3 daggers and plunged them into Absalom's heart as he dangled and killed him. When the word of this gets out, people were elated. It was like, ding dong, the wicked witch is dead, right? The war was over. The tyrant was no longer this looming threat. People celebrated. They partied in the streets. They stayed up all night and ate and drank and danced until the break of dawn. Like everyone cheered because they hated that kid. They were glad he was gone, out of the way, out of their lives. In fact, it says in 2 Samuel chapter 18, verse 19, one of the soldiers said, let me run to the king with the good news. No, Joab told him, it wouldn't be good news to the king that his son is dead. I think this is one of the most sobering moments to think about as a parent. But there could be a moment in which things have gotten so bad with your kid that everyone celebrates their demise. And you're heartbroken. Why? Because no matter what they do, they're still your kid. David is heartbroken, right? His son is dead. And it was even worse because he knew that he was partially responsible. Because those who aren't held accountable end up not knowing how to hold themselves accountable. And that's what happened to Absalom. It turns out like my grocery checkout line magazine paranoia is not completely unfounded. Because these situations happen. Our kids need to be guided and directed and disciplined by us as parents. And we're going to have to overcome our own insecurity in order to do that. So how do we do it? I want to give you just a couple, what I hope are helpful hints for you to be able to discipline your kids a little bit better. And the first thing I would say, like, begin by reminding them, this isn't who you are. To move from saying like, don't do that to we don't do this. This isn't you. Like, you're better than this. We'll say in our family, like, we're Smiths. We don't solve our problems with violence. You are acting in a way that is counter to the kind of person that you are meant to be. The second thing I would say is ask your kids, what's really going on? You ever notice that sometimes there's like this explosive moment, this weird behavior comes out and you're thinking to yourself, like, what has gotten into you, right? But one thing I think that is helpful is to just give an opportunity to say like, hey, what's really going on? Sometimes it is literally as simple as they took something that I wanted. But I'm always surprised, like, I would say like half the time when I stop and I slow down, I take a deep breath, and I say like, what's really going on? and something comes out of them that had been pent up inside of them and they didn't really know how to share it. And sometimes you can get to the root of something by slowing down. If all we're doing is focusing on surface behavior, sometimes we don't get to the root of what's causing it, where they feel like they haven't gotten any of your time. They're feeling lonely. They're feeling crazy because of everything that's happening in the world right now. They're feeling insecure about something in their life and they're acting out. Simply giving them the time to share is enormously helpful. The third thing I would suggest is to let them know that sorry means, how can I make things right between us? A lot of times I think that sorry is like this throwaway thing, like sorry. And it's like, okay, that's cool that you said it, but you don't really mean it unless you're willing to do what it takes to make things right. That's usually something my kids do not want to do. They're okay to say sorry, but then when I ask them to follow up with, how can I make things right between us? My kids will usually right away be like, but then they might ask me to do something. It's like, yeah, they probably will. And you should probably do it. If you actually are sorry, which means I've done something that's fractured the relationship and I want to make it right. And then to actually be willing to follow through with that. We need to basically educate our kids on what it means to make amends, to take accountability for their side of the equation in the relationship and be willing to do what it takes to work on themselves and to fix things that maybe they've broken. The fourth thing is that consequences ought to feel connected, right? If we give a consequence for something that doesn't feel at all connected to the crime, right? Then there's not really any learning. The consequences have to mirror reality. They have to mirror the adult world. Listen, if you hit your sister, you're going to be in isolation in your room. This is a connected consequence because if you get older and you hit someone in public, you're going to be in isolation in a jail cell. This is mirroring how the world actually works. And why does the adult world work that way? Because people don't feel safe around you because you're a violent person. We need to be able to connect the dots for our kids and the consequences, which means that sometimes we've got to send them to sit and wait while we figure out what consequence is actually going to connect the dots for them so that they're learning how the world works, how relationships work, how equations in life actually work. And then the last thing that I would suggest is to ask, is there anything you might want to do differently next time? I'm always interested in what my kids will come up with in these moments. If it's just the two of us, we're sitting on their bed. Is there anything you might want to do different next time? I don't know. Well, if you did know, what's just maybe an idea? They usually know what the right thing to do is. They have the ability to solve their own problem. They have the ability to come up with a better way of being. But if I solve it for them, they never have to exercise the muscle of figuring out, how can I brainstorm how not to react that way and end up in this situation next time? Because I don't want to end up the way I feel right now. I don't want to end up in the place I am right now. I don't want to end up with these consequences that I'm experiencing right now. So what could I do differently next time? And the truth is, you're not going to be the perfect parent because there is no such thing. The important thing is to lean in and to engage with our kids, to actually be connected to them and to be willing to confront them when we need to love them enough to call them out, to give them a path forward, to actually enforce consequences that are going to teach them how the world works, to love them enough to say, this behavior, if it grows and mutates and evolves, is going to take you somewhere you don't want to go. It's going to turn you into someone you weren't made to be. And it's a tough process, and every kid is different. But I want to encourage you that you can lean in and you can do what's right for them with God's help, because you don't want to end up in a situation like David where they've gone off the deep end and you knew there was something you could have done to negate it. This is what I want to pray into your life today. God would give you wisdom and courage every step of the way to be the best parent that you can be for your kids. Would you just bow your heads with me wherever you find yourself today? God, I'm so grateful for the lives that you've given us, for the families that you've given us. And yet, family life is complicated. Parenting is complicated. And God, I pray that you would give us wisdom and guidance to do what's right for our kids. God, thank you for your word and for the cautionary tales of how sometimes things go awry. And God, I pray that you would give us guidance to discipline our kids well, out of love, out of sincerity, God, out of a state of calm and Christ-likeness. But God, help us to steer them in the direction of character above all else. And God, as they build that foundation in their lives through you, God, may you make them strong so that they can withstand whatever comes their way later in life. God, we're thankful for what you've given us. God, help us to steward it well, including our families, our relationships. In Jesus' name, amen. Now, if you prayed that prayer with me today and you have this sense inside yourself that, and I really want to place Christ at the core of my existence. I've been doing life on my own for a long time. I've been trying to manage my family the only way I know how, but I really do need divine wisdom, guidance, and patience. And we believe that placing Jesus at the center of your life is the start of all of that. Things ripple out from that internal place. And if that's something that you've done this morning as you were praying along with me, I want to encourage you to let us know by texting the word connect to the number on the bottom of your screen right now. And we're going to send you an electronic connect card. It'll bounce back right to you in just a second. And you can fill that out with your name and a couple base pieces of information, as well as check any of the boxes that apply to you. Let us know that you've said yes to Jesus, but also any other information you want about our church or what it means to have a relationship with Jesus. And we will connect back with you and help you take your next step in faith. It's not about joining a church. It's not about any of that. It's really about connecting your soul to Christ and being able to grow into the best version of yourself, to understand who he is and who he's made you to be, and to move in that direction little by little by little. Because as you get better, every relationship that's attached to you gets better, including your family. There's one other thing that I want to invite you to do with us today, and that is to give with us. And every weekend, we like to give a regular reminder of the importance of giving. Your faithful giving is what makes church happen here at South Hills. Without your faithful investment in our church, we wouldn't be able to have these online services, create the content for our social media sites, and be able to host the multiple in-person things that we've begun to slowly release over the last couple of months, like youth and young adults, several different groups and studies that are meeting on and off campus, as well as volunteer trainings and leadership trainings that we've been doing throughout the week. And all of this is made possible by you and your giving. And I want to just thank you for your faithfulness, and not just faithfulness to us, but faithfulness to God, believing that God is serious when he says that you can trust him with your money, and that when you give to him through your local church, that all of our resources together can do something far greater than what you could do with them on your own. And we have been seeing so much incredible life change and people's lives and relationships getting better on so many different levels. And not only that, we've been able to do so much in our community. And throughout this series of Family Month, we've been highlighting strategic outreach partners that we give money to and also do outreach projects with in order to help families in our community. And as you're giving today, I want you to take a look at this interview we recorded last week with Dr. Cassandra from Leaps and Bounds to see exactly how your giving is helping them change the lives of local families right here in Corona.
Hi, my name is Gretchen and I'm the community director here at South Hills, and we just wanted to take an opportunity every week of this month to highlight one of our community partners that we love to serve and people who are serving the community that we live in. And I wanted to introduce you to Dr. Cassandra from Leaps and Bounds. Thank you so much for being with us today.
I love being here, love being part of the South Hills community. We're so fortunate to have you guys as partners, honestly. To see God's work done right there on our campus is just so touching, especially during these times right now where our kids really need that love and support from people they've never met before. And the importance of coming together as a community, getting these kids outside, interacting with animals, with new people, just watching how all of the members of South Hills conduct themselves and share their heart and their love and their time it's just even more touching than it's ever been before.
That's amazing. And if you wouldn't mind taking just a couple minutes and sharing what exactly is Leaps and Bounds? What do you guys do and how do you impact families in our community?
At Leaps and Bounds Pediatric Therapy, we serve children with disabilities, but it's so much more than that. We take care of the whole family. We take care of the parents and the siblings of each and every child that we serve, and we couldn't do that without the support from South Hills and so many other partners in our community. We do that through our nonprofit organization, and these kids, we've gone from serving about 100 a week just 2 years ago. This is our 10th year. We're really excited for that.
Yeah.
And we are serving over 600 children per week. The numbers just keep growing of young families right here in our own cities that need our help and don't want to go far for it. And we do a special type of therapy called hippotherapy, where we use the horse in their physical therapy, occupational therapy, and speech therapy. So it's really been an amazing blessing to me coming to my hometown and serving those kids that right here in the city where I grew up.
At South Hills, it's so important for us to be able to serve partners in our community that are doing such amazing work supporting families, and Leaps and Bounds is definitely one of them. So if you are interested in getting involved in Leaps and Bounds, there are many ways that you can serve. One of them coming up very soon, which is the horsemanship camp later this month. We'd love to have you jump on the Church Center app and volunteer for that. If you wouldn't mind, Dr. Cassandra, to share what is the horsemanship camp and why is it important for people to volunteer at that?
Yeah, our horsemanship camps were really born out of the need to serve the siblings that come to our ranch, and so many typically developing children who want to be part of serving others themselves. So our children learn the spirit of volunteerism and helping someone who needs a little bit more help that might be their same age, which is really cool. They learn educational things about ranching, about planting and growing, and animals. So there's always an educational piece, and of course there's always a lot of fun with riding the horses, goat races, dressing sheep, and the volunteers will get really involved with all of that. We love to have our volunteers hands-on with the kids, maybe learning about a career that they might be interested in, or just giving back to a child that needs their help.
And I know all of our volunteers that served at the horsemanship camp in September loved it, had so much fun. And if you would love to be a part of the next one, jump on the Church Center app, go to the events tab, and you can find all the information there. And what would be a way that someone could get in touch with you if they're interested in supporting what you do and maybe volunteering or contributing in some way?
Yeah, any information can be found at leapspediatric.org. Just Google searching Leaps and Bounds in Norco. We pretty much come right up. So that World Wide Web.
Thank you so much for being with us today. I appreciate it.
Thank you, Gretchen.
Thank you guys so much for joining us this week. We hope that you were encouraged, that you laughed, and that you learned something new. We'd love to remind you to fill out that Connect card if you're brand new with us, and you can do that by texting the word CONNECT to 951-476-2554 or grabbing the link down below. Thank you guys so much for watching today. We'll see you next week for more Family Month.